Big Questions with the Dead Milkmen.
It was from AJ Metal Earth, whom I don't know, but he asked if you guys wanted to tell Dave Blood stories. I don't have any because I never met him, but
Make one up.
Well, I don't know. I have that. Did you ever